Hey, this is Owen Robinson. This is the Rejuvenate podcast, and I'm very happy today to be joined again by Jacob, the creator of the HG7 formula. And as promised, he's going to share his DNA methylation results with us today, which is exciting. Something that we've been waiting for a long time. And even before I let him speak, I just want to give him credit for being willing to do this, because I was saying it's not only obscure figures on the internet who should be showing that their stuff actually works. It's actually everyone. Most health teachers, most gurus, most whatever you want to call it, they're not sharing their results. They're often hiding behind credentials or institutions or experience or whatever it might be. And so I give great credit to Jacob for doing this. I'm excited to share those with you. But before we do that, let's say hi, Jacob, and just have him introduce himself again, give his background, because there may be a lot of people who end up watching or listening to this who don't know what he is and what he's discovered. So, hey, Jacob.
Good to be here. I think it's been, what is it, 5, 6 months since our last podcast, or somewhere around 4 to 6 months.
Something like that. Yep, yep. It's before I moved, which was about 5 months ago. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, for those who haven't haven't seen this, series of HG7 episodes yet, my name is Jacob. I've been working on a supplement protocol for the last 15 years of my life, I guess you could say. And it has, as of late, kind of blown up a little bit on the underground side of things in the internet. Um, it started, I guess you could say, when I was around 19. I was really into weightlifting, and I couldn't really maintain much of a physique at the time, and it was really hard. I had to work out really hard to maintain like the average levels of a guy my age in school, and other things were starting to arise like chronic fatigue, and I started losing my hair in high school, believe it or not. It was shedding. So I started to come up with this kind of base level theory at the time that I was zinc deficient. And throughout this experience, I mean, throughout the 15 years that I've been figuring this out, it kept kind of building as a theory. It started out just a simple zinc deficiency, taking zinc, oh, I feel better. And then after a few weeks, I wasn't feeling better anymore, but I wasn't, or excuse me, the zinc wasn't doing anything anymore. And I wasn't feeling better yet, but I was convinced that zinc was like part of this problem, this huge problem that I was dealing with hormonally, um, emotionally, physically. I was getting sicker and sicker. Mentally, my health was kind of losing over time. So this was a theory to fix hair loss, emotional issues, chronic fatigue, and a bunch of other things because I had searched online for what causes hormonal distress, hormonal imbalances in the body, and so I had come across zinc and said zinc was responsible for the blocking of the aromatase enzyme, or a huge piece of doing that. And the aromatase enzyme was responsible for the, excess conversion, they said on the internet, that was responsible for excess estrogen levels in the body, or your free testosterone not being able to stay free testosterone. And at the time, the internet would have told you that DHT was the biggest cause of hair loss, which that information has changed since then. But I was really into figuring out what was causing hormones to not be regulated in the body, and DHT to be, out of regulation, testosterone to not be at the normal levels, estrogen to be too high. Like, I was figuring out what was causing all of this, and at the root of all of these things, zinc was the root of it. It was always at the root of it. It was, a couple other things, but there was always zinc there. So okay, I'm gonna go ahead and take a guess that zinc is the problem. But I couldn't take zinc more than 50 milligrams a day, and even then, after a while, it started getting really harsh. And the reason why I felt like it was the problem was because at first, when I started taking it, was solving all of these things. I was taking, 50 milligrams a day. Suddenly, my body composition started getting better. My hair started feeling thicker. My emotions started feeling calmer for a couple of weeks. And then it stopped working. And I was like, well, that didn't last very long. And so I started taking other things to try and balance this out because I read online that you need to balance nutrients with other things. And so one of the biggest nutrients that the internet would have said to balance with zinc at the time was copper. And I started taking copper a little bit, and all of a sudden I felt great again for 3 days. And then I took both zinc and copper after that, and I started feeling worse and worse and worse. And I researched online again and said, why am I feeling bad after taking zinc and copper? And I stumbled upon an article about copper bioavailability. And it was listing all the symptoms of copper bioavailability versus, and slash copper toxicity versus actual copper deficiency. And it was listing things like bipolar disorder, hormonal deficiency, hair problems, skin problems, like every possible uh, ailment that I was dealing with was listed under these like copper biounavailability toxicity symptoms. And so that's when I got into the theory. I said, okay, maybe I have too much copper. How do I get rid of copper? And so I would research what antagonizes copper in the body. How do you get rid of it? And then I got into huge things. I got into a huge deep dive into metal chelation at the time, and this was by the time I had hit this level in the protocol or the theory, it must have been early 20s because up until then it was just get more zinc in the body. Well, that stopped working. So I said, okay, maybe I need to get something out of the body that's blocking my zinc. And that ended up being kind of the base of this whole theory, which is a series of 7 nutrients that increase zinc uptake and get rid of stuff that's blocking that zinc uptake. Um, and the reason why you
Can
can't,
I just
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
can I just ask, going back to the copper biounavailable thing? Like, I think you're 100% right, and many schools of thought I've researched since all agree. The only question I have is, the two avenues to dealing with that level of free copper, which is very damaging, is either to reduce the level of free copper by increasing the rate at which your body removes it, or to increase levels of ceruloplasmin, which binds the copper and makes it bioavailable, so stops it being free and stops it being so damaging. Um, did you look into that, and was there a reason you decided to go more for the avenue of excreting it as opposed to increasing its bioavailability?
Well, so actually, both. Like I wanted to, maybe my understanding of it wasn't as uh, deep as it is, or I mean, as what you described then. But I always had thought that the way to get rid of copper was to increase ceruloplasmin or whatever, to get to increase those levels. Like that was what I had come to the conclusion of at the time. So I was trying to take things to increase that production.
It gets rid of free copper, which is the problem. So yeah, I mean it's close enough, I guess. All right, so you were always trying to do it
So it was
by.
like accidentally, I was like trying to do both. Um, So in this process, a lot of these nutrients are kind of accomplishing both. Like you are, I want to believe that you are increasing ceruloplasmin in this process. I want to believe that because I feel like the copper that I'm extracting is also being used for things like energy and ATP production and all these other things. Because I'm not just like doing this process, which we'll, get into in a little bit, but doing this process, I feel bursts of energy and bursts of other things. So I want to imagine that it's not just extracting free copper and eliminating it, it's also converting free copper into available copper to use. But
Well,
anyway,
that's something that we probably we test another time. But that's not what the test results we're showing today. The test results we're showing today are much more, specific to overall health and overall longevity and all the rest of it. But it would be interesting. Um, yeah. Okay. Anyway, so sorry. Carry on.
so no, and so kind of to regurgitate so far. So in high school, I got really into supplements because of working out. I was losing my hair. I was getting all these emotional turmoil issues. My mental health started to decline at this time. It wasn't quite as profoundly declining at this time, but it was starting. I couldn't manage my emotions very well. I was not very strong physically, and I couldn't maintain a physique very well. So I was looking for things to fix all that. Um, And so I stumbled across zinc across the many different things that I was researching for boosting testosterone as well as reducing things like estrogen, because I had done enough research on hormones at the time to know that generally, if you want to gain strength in weightlifting, your testosterone being high is a good thing, is kind of where I was at in my knowledge there. And reducing any feminine hormones would have been ideal at the time because I had a baby face and I had really soft skin and I had no muscle tone or not. And so I was wanted to also at the same time while raising testosterone reduce estrogen. I didn't go much further into the knowledge than just that high level. And then I started getting into supplements and realizing as I was raising testosterone, I was increasing that shedding of my hair. I would get testosterone boosters, not like actual testosterone, but I would get like Tribulus terrestris or whatever the herb that's supposed to stimulate the signaling of your testes to produce more testosterone or something like that. That's what they say. I don't know if I felt like it was that strong or anything, but it certainly, I felt more aggression on some of these testosterone boosters. And while at the same time feeling that aggression, I would feel my hair shed more. And so that's what kind of drove me to get into this research faster and faster because I thought, oh, if I lose my hair at 19, I'm not going to be a very happy guy. So anyway, fast forward, I have been taking all sorts of different things, anything I can get my hands on it. I had been a supplement nutrition manager for a supplement company back in the day for a brief period of time. And so I had access to try all these different supplements. I had an employee discount. I'm going to buy everything I can get my hands on until I can figure out what is going on with my body that's causing all this estrogen to be produced and this testosterone to not be produced or not stay as testosterone. Um, and eventually I started realizing that my zinc would be taken easier if I took it with things like B6. So I started taking my zinc with vitamin B6, and that felt great for a while. And it worked for another, couple of weeks, and I'd feel great. And then I started getting things like neuropathy. They say B6 is supposed to cause things like neuropathy when taken in too high doses, and they generally be right. Um, and so I started getting that. I was like, okay, instead of keeping the mindset that it's the B6 causing this, maybe it's B6 draining something else that is causing the neuropathy. Like, so rather than being a toxicity symptom, in my mind, I was like, maybe it's a deficiency symptom of something else. And so I kept causing more symptoms with other nutrients and trying to fix that cause. Like I would take more B6. Oh, that's causing the symptoms. I'd try a different B vitamin. Suddenly I'd fix other symptoms in my body. Okay, I need that in the mix. And I would keep doing this until I found the full loop. And I found a full loop of 7 nutrients that, if you take them in the right ratios, they all sort of drain each other in unison. And as they're draining each other, heavy metals come down with that. They start getting extracted and depleted in the body, or so the theory was. So as I'm taking all this B6, taking all these other vitamins and this antioxidant and zinc and another mineral, molybdenum, the theory is as you take all of these, each one is sort of draining another in the system, and they'll drain together in unison as it's also extracting what I theorize to be iron and copper out of your zinc receptor sites. And as that iron and copper is leaving those zinc receptor sites, the zinc is now finally able to be stored. And as that zinc starts rising in the storage in the receptors, your DNA theoretically starts to heal. And I theorize this also uh, slows down aging, if nothing else. I mean, I'd like to believe that after a long enough timeline on this process, you might even see a reversal in age, but that's all theoretical. Um, and so yeah, basically been doing all of these different, taking all these different supplements until for the last 15 years of my life, until up until 2021, where I finally completed that loop. So that was a good 10 to 15 year, 10 to 15 in between there of just trying different nutrients, trying the wrong nutrients, making myself worse and worse and worse. And by the time I had just discovered this, I was on death's door. I was in the hospital. I just got out of the hospital from kidney like malfunction. Like I had a stone the size of a 10 millimeter size stone that they had to remove surgically because it was just too big, and it was like thrashing around in my kidneys, and they were bleeding pretty bad.
And how did that happen from your point of view? What caused that? Because you were young at the time, right?
We'll go deeper into how I think like causes these stones a little bit, but basically too much EGCG in this formula. It's a piece of this formula, EGCG, that causes rapid iron removal, or at least I believe it to do so. It binds to iron and removes it, causes it not to recycle in the body. But what that does is it causes a quick flush of metals into the kidneys. And the reason why this formula works is because it's balancing that out. So it's preparing your body for this huge flush of metal and spiking up your uric acid in that moment to be able to flush it out easily without thrashing your kidneys around. Is what I believe it to be doing. Um,
Okay.
and so without that piece, I had taken a ton of EGCG at this time. I was taking all of these nutrients individually, by the way, just large doses of these individual nutrients, one at a time, in sequence, without at this point in time. And so at that time in the hospital, um, I had I had almost given up. I was depressed. I was bipolar. I mean, I was sicker than a dog. I couldn't do anything in my life. And I was about ready to give up, and I just had this idea. I said, just before I felt this terrible, terrible feeling, and I'd taken all this molybdenum and this EGCG and ended up in the hospital, I felt really good for like 30 seconds. And I had a theory that I said, what if all that molybdenum and EGCG I just took at the very end, that last little piece of the puzzle, um, what if it was working, but it just drained everything else so fast that it caused like this massive stone, like just rapidly because of just how much I was taking. And I went home after having surgery and doing the exact thing that put me in there in the first place. I go and take a handful of all these pills, and instead of taking them individually, I took all of them at the same time. And that changed the game. I didn't feel terrible anymore. It started my hands started feeling warm. I started feeling happy for the first time in my, 10 last 15 years of doing this. I went from near death in the hospital to not wanting to basically live anymore at that point, to feeling like I've got so much motivation to do whatever it is I want to do right now. Like I just took all these nutrients and suddenly I went from off switch to on, but I didn't know the right ratios yet, and so it felt great for a good while, and then I hit a certain point where I had taken too much of one thing to where it kind of depleted something else, and then it started to feel a little bad again. But I was chasing that feeling ever since, and so from that point, for the last 4, 5, 5 years from now, it's been a fine tuning game of these ratios, and I posted it online like or no, excuse me, like a year ago, almost a little more than a year ago now, back in November of 2024. I posted online and some guy found it on X and posted it on on his forum that he's got. It was called at the time the Low Toxin Forum. Um, and we had a bunch of people online willing to try this thing. And so for the last year, we've got a bunch of people online trying this 7 nutrient formula, which we now call HG7. It was actually a name given by the operator of that forum. His name's, or excuse me, the admin of the forum, who said it was named for the Holy Grail, 7 nutrients. Um, and I liked it, and it's also plays on the name Heisenberg, which is my online name, HG. Um, and number seven is significant in this because the biggest discovery I would say of this formula is the biotin. There's 7 nutrients in this formula, and each one isn't wildly outside the range of recommended daily values, except for two, or except for biotin and EGCG. But biotin
And
specifically,
molybdenum, I would
yeah.
say.
But biotin, I mean, so molybdenum, we're talking like maybe, I mean, upwards of, okay, it's a lot. We're taking 7 to 8 milligrams per dose, but even that is still not nearly the percentage excess of the recommended daily
Yeah.
amount that what biotin is. Like biotin
Biotin's
is
tens of thousands of times, yeah.
like hundreds of thousands almost if you're taking of your recommended daily because uh, and I'm jumping around here. I don't want to get too all over the place so far. I want to go a little linear here, but biotin, vitamin B7, of all the things, that one was the biggest discovery because there is no information online to tell you to take 2.5 grams of pure biotin powder, which is what this protocol calls for per standard dose. And there isn't really much online to tell you more to take more than 5 milligrams. 10 milligrams they say is plenty. I heavily disagree after doing this protocol. I think 10 milligrams is nothing, and we'll go into why in a bit. But um, so yeah, you got 7 nutrients on this protocol. HG7 is vitamin B6, vitamin B5, vitamin B7, which is biotin, B5 being pantothenic acid, and B6 being pyridoxine hydrochloride. And I want to stress this. There are several people who will claim that P5P is the far better form of vitamin B6. And the reason why is it's its active form. I do not recommend the active form for this protocol because the whole idea behind this protocol is it's turning B6 into its active form when it needs it. So I really stress when I say take the pyridoxine hydrochloride for this protocol. The P5P will destroy the balance.
If you've ever thought to yourself, why am I always hungry? Why am I always thinking about food? And then beating yourself up about it, stop. It's not lack of discipline. I know this is controversial to say, but the truth is it actually isn't your fault. You're not greedy or gluttonous, you're not undisciplined, you're actually leptin resistant, and you're not alone. Leptin resistance is a consequence of living a modern lifestyle of excess blue light, excess stress, not enough sleep, and chemical food additives. It's the number one reason so many people in their 40s and 50s feel hungry 24/7 and can't shift the weight no matter what they try. Hi, I'm Melvin Robinson from the Rejuvenate podcast, and along with Dr. Miriam Mikitsky, I built the Hormetics weight optimization system because we kept seeing the same thing. Good people doing everything right but still stuck because their hormones were actually the problem. And conversely, when we helped them with their hormones, losing weight, not overeating became really easy for them without even trying. The leptin balance formula is the first formula we released. It contains African mango, chromium picolinate, Ceylon cinnamon, and alpha lipoic acid. Chosen because the science shows that these ingredients at these precise quantities help restore the full satiated signal naturally. Go to advancedhealthgenetics.com/leptin, order now, and you will be invited to join our clinical study the moment you check out at no extra cost. So you can track exactly how well it works for you. And you can help us to prove to the world exactly how well it works. And to thank you for being a podcast listener, use code REJUVENATE at checkout for 20% off now. That's advancedhealthgenetics.com/leptin and use Rejuvenate for 20% off now.
No, and then so we have vitamin C, and again, that one I don't recommend any special form. I actually just recommend ascorbic acid, and I can't give you a scientific reason other than I've just experienced the best effects from using straight ascorbic acid, and I highly, highly stress do not buy any forms that have any um, uh, added antioxidants in it because that might fluctuate or that might interact in a negative way with the EGCG of this protocol. It might overdo the chelation portion or do it in a completely different sequence that this isn't that is not made for or right for this protocol. So stick to ascorbic acid on that one. And then we have 2 minerals, zinc, which I recommend just straight zinc gluconate. I know it's usually the harshest one, but you kind of want that. Um, and the reason I say want harsher form is because it's when it's harsh, that's kind of a signal for your body to say, like, I don't need zinc at this very moment in time. You want the
In
harsh.
what way
Sorry,
is
go
it
ahead.
harsh? In what way is it
Well,
harsh?
I found in out of all the zincs that I've tried, zinc picolinate, zinc gluconate, zinc nicotine, I forget how to say that one. Nicotinate, is that how you say that? Um,
I haven't tried that. There's zinc glycinate. I think zinc sulfate is generally considered the most harsh, like the most likely to make someone
or
nauseous.
I think zinc oxide might be rather harsh too. I can't remember, but I just know that out of most of the zincs that I've tried, taking zinc gluconate when you don't need it, you'll throw up pretty quick, or at least I have. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
Whereas zinc picolinate, if I didn't need it, it would sweat out instead of throwing up. Like I would sweat it out easier, if that makes sense.
All right. I just wondering as well, because zinc glycinate is generally considered to be 2 to 3 times better absorbed than zinc gluconate.
Well, I mean,
Um,
it might just be a price point thing that I'm recommending it for at this point then, because if usually, or the availability of it, I find zinc gluconate everywhere. I don't know if you find zinc glycinate in as many stores as you would gluconate, but I don't know.
Maybe not a high street store. Anyway, you found what works for this protocol. I was just curious. Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the other part is like the other reason I recommend gluconate is because I use it, and I'm sick and tired of finding out that there are other effects of other forms that I wasn't prepared for, and I keep telling people, yeah, it's fine if you use that form, and then we find out later on, oh, actually, it wasn't fine that you used that form. So I'm just gonna say because I use gluconate for this, if you want the standard results that I'm experiencing, or if you want to get or if make sure that you're doing everything that would result in the same that I'm getting.
Yeah, it's just being true to the protocols. Fair enough.
Yeah. And then there's molybdenum, and this is a big one. This was like the last piece of this formula that it took me forever to figure out. For the longest time, I thought the only mineral that I need for this protocol is zinc. Um, and technically, it is the only protocol or the only mineral I want to raise my storage of. But molybdenum doesn't really store, or at least not the molybdenum amino acid chelate form. It doesn't store that much. You sweat it. I mean, I've experienced it empirically. I've sweated out. I can see it in my fingertips whenever I take too much molybdenum. Like my fingertip sweat gets like they start getting a little oily, and I can actually see the little sparkles of the metal like getting out of my sweat there. It's really weird. But anyway, molybdenum doesn't store nearly as much as like iron or copper would in the body. Um, and it is a mineral that helps your body produce uric acid. And that uric acid, I'm theorizing, is what's causing or allowing these metals in your kidneys that are building up to flush out and excrete. Without that uric acid, I believe these metals will just build and build and build, or thrash around in your kidneys, and it won't be a very positive experience, or they'll recycle. Like it's actually known that molybdenum is needed for copper excretion. Um, at least it's highly
Yes.
backed by
Yeah.
information.
If someone has Wilson's disease, they often use a modified form of molybdenum to reduce the excess copper. I think that's established. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the last piece of this after the zinc and the molybdenum is EGCG, which is a antioxidant derived from green tea leaf extract, and it is a very powerful iron chelator. It also actually does chelate copper a little bit, but it's really strong on the iron. And I also believe it to chelate other metals, though I'm not as familiar with the mechanisms of how or how much of it, it does. I'm mainly focused on the iron. And actually I'll explain the iron a little bit deeper here. So zinc, iron, and copper are the three minerals that kind of compete for absorption. And the reason why I theorized iron to be the problem is because the only thing that would block zinc from entering its receptor sites, at least based on my research, was iron. Like that would be the only metal heavy enough to stop zinc from going to where it needs to go, because zinc will displace copper. The reason why zinc and copper need balance is because they are antagonistic to each other. Zinc, like think of two metals with a positive and two positive ends of a magnet. They repel each other, kind of in a way. Uh, Zinc will go into these receptors and repel out, I believe it to anyway, repel out this free copper from your tissues and surge it through the blood with the help of vitamin B6 and all these other nutrients. And it can do that just fine unless there's something else blocking it. And that something else I believe to be iron. Because I'm finding every time I take EGCG, I mean, this was early in the protocol, I would take EGCG to chelate iron, which I already had figured out early on that that's what it did. And it worked pretty well. The only problem is I kept getting copper toxicity symptoms whenever I would take EGCG on its own. My estrogen would go up. Like my chest would get flabbier, my skin would get softer, My emotions would get more profound. The more EGCG I took on its own, the more those effects started to rise. And it got to the point where I started experiencing severe copper toxicity symptoms, like what they believe can result in things like bipolar disorder and even schizophrenia if it gets bad enough. I was getting to that point where I was experiencing these symptoms, and it was getting worse the more EGCG I took on its own. And so that's why I theorized iron and copper are the problem. And I also eventually the theory worked up to iron is actually suppressing copper from the blood and vice versa. They both kind of need that balance. If you've got too much copper in your blood, you're going to appear iron deficient. If you've got too much iron in your blood, you're going to appear copper deficient and zinc deficient. Um, and so the logical conclusion there was instead of taking more copper, I want to bring down this iron. And then when the copper gets too much, instead of taking more iron or more zinc, more iron, I need to bring down this copper, which I thought zinc was the only mineral that would I needed to do that. Turns out you also need that molybdenum. If you don't take that molybdenum, zinc just pushes the copper. It aggravates it. It'll mobilize it, but it won't excrete it on its own. The molybdenum is what I've found actually does most of the excretion job of with copper. And so the whole theory is you are taking all of these nutrients to spike up your iron and copper from the tissues into the blood to send to the liver and kidneys for detox while chelating them at the same time so they don't recycle and go back into the receptors, and then replacing those areas you just pulled all that iron and copper from with zinc. So if we think about this the best analogy I've come up with recently is like a mining operation. You have overgrown copper and iron mines in your zinc receptors, and your body chooses to use those zinc receptors because it's treating iron and copper like it's rare. And because it's treating iron and copper like it's a rare mineral, and because they are heavier than normal, they don't excrete very well. And so rather than surging through the blood constantly, which would probably kill you from things like dehydration and other unwanted stimulatory effects, it goes and oxidizes in your tissues in the zinc receptor sites. What this is doing over time in these overgrown mines, eventually your zinc mines are unusable. You eventually are not able to use zinc properly anymore, and you start experiencing hormonal imbalances. And you start, this is essentially what I theorize to cause aging and diseases. I mean, most of them, and that's again theory. Not I can't say that with fact, but I believe this to be these minds to be crucial in keeping the whole body regulated and young and healthy. And so the way that you fix this is by having a mining operation and think of a large cart track with a mining cart running and you've got guys in the receptors swinging a pickaxe at that copper and iron and loading the carts and sending it to the livers to designate it as recyclable or excretable. And then it gets the final piece of the cart mining operation is the kidneys where it's excreted and then the cart comes back for more. As you keep doing this, you're lowering your copper and iron, you're raising your zinc. This mining operation continues. Eventually, you start to heal. Now, if we think of vitamin B6 as like the guy swinging the pickaxe, B6 is the guy swinging the pickaxe and chucking the heavy metals into the cart. But he can't do this alone. He needs coenzymators, partners in the operation. Biotin is a huge coenzymator of B6. Biotin is this guy, and I'm going to attribute this guy in the analogy. I don't know how accurate this is, but this is what helps me, helps me visualize this process. Is biotin is the guy rebuilding the cart from the wear and tear of all these metals. He is cleaning up the area. He's repairing these damaged areas where B6 is just ravaging around with a pickaxe, swinging as hard as he can. He's not looking where he's going. He's just swinging and getting metal and chucking it in there. Biotin's kind of more of like the cleanup crew and fixing and little problems. Without that cleanup crew, things start to fall apart and you start to feel really terrible. So biotin's keeping that at bay. Well, you also need power generators. Without the power generators, the lights go off. You can't continue the mining operation. The cart won't move because there's no electricity running at all. That's where B5 comes in. That's the other coenzymator. B5 and biotin both work with B6 to do this mining operation job. Now you also need cart pushers. The cart won't move easily on its own, so you need someone to push that cart throughout the operation. That's vitamin C. Vitamin C is a mobilizer of copper. It's not a very strong copper chelator, but it will chelate copper and it will mobilize copper throughout the bloodstream. And it is pushing this mining cart. And it's also actually helps with iron absorption, which I actually think it helps with iron absorption by indirectly removing copper to surface iron. Um, but as vitamin C is pushing this cart, you eventually arrive at the liver site. Now, if you have a mining cart full of iron that isn't bound by EGCG, and your liver's going to say, no, I want this iron. It's rare. We should keep it. I'm going to hang on to it, and I might surface it through the blood a little bit, but it's not going anywhere. And eventually, it'll go right back into the storage where you pulled it from. Um, that's where the EGCG comes in and says, nope, I don't want this iron. I'm going to bind it. I'm going to wrap around it, and now you can't recognize it as iron anymore. It's not something that you recognize. Let's pass it down to the kidneys, and it is no longer recyclable. So once EGCG has bound all this iron at the liver, it goes all to the kidneys. All that mining cart continues down and heads to the kidneys for elimination. Now there's like think of this last piece like a garbage chute where it's dumping this cart full of metal into like a filtration system where most of the iron's being shot out through the bile ducts, and then the rest goes towards the kidneys, mostly free copper, maybe a little elements of iron, but mostly the copper. Iron's a little bit larger a molecule, tends to dump out the bile ducts, I think, more. But it's still some element of both. And then but as it, there's like a drain filter, so all this metal will kind of pile up in the kidneys, unable to fully get through. And you can think of molybdenum as kind of like the filter gate opener, and so it allows this metal what couldn't quite pass through the filter. That uric acid production that molybdenum causes, I believe, allows the metal to pass through that filter and then finally out through the urine. Without that last little filter drainage or that floodgate opener of molybdenum, those metals will kind of just stick in the kidneys a little bit and eventually recycle back into the blood and eventually go back into storage. So you get rid of the metal here, and then the last piece is that zinc. So when B6 is swinging that pickaxe, that's a zinc pickaxe that he's swinging. And without that pickaxe, or without taking enough zinc, that pickaxe begins to wear down, and it can't quite remove the copper it needs to or load the mining carts very easily, but it'll still load, any free metals it can with the B6, but eventually that pickaxe will get so weak that it won't be able to do the job very well, and you start shutting down a little bit in other areas. And then I also theorize that the cells still need a metal, like the tissues that you're pulling this copper and iron from. I believe that it still needs that one of those metals, whether it's zinc, copper, and iron. It needs that metal to conduct electricity. Without that metal in there, I believe it can't conduct the electricity it needs for the mitochondria to do its thing or whatever. I'm not that deep into it, but so you can think of zinc as like the most optimal metal to have in those receptors. It's the lightest mineral of all the three, and it's also the I consider it to be the most optimal because it's also doing all these other things of balancing hormones and all this. Iron will conduct the electricity, I believe, but I don't believe the iron is very good at blocking the aromatase enzyme, for example. So zinc is kind of like a multi-bird with one stone mineral being in that receptor, whereas iron will just do the job of maybe conducting that electricity a little bit. Zinc will conduct it better, is what I think. And so as this mining operation continues, you're bringing down that iron copper mine, you're bringing up the zinc. And that's the theory. Sorry that was a lot. I know it's hard to keep straight on that, but yeah. And so now and now I've been doing this quote unquote properly for the last 4 years, and I went from being near death, depressed, hormonally challenged, emotionally just destroyed, and I had asthma, I had insomnia, I had very poor body composition. I couldn't eat many things. My digestion was really bad to the point where if I had any cheese, dairy at all, I mean, lactose intolerance times 10. Like it would, like I couldn't digest food. Everything in my life was just terrible. I started doing this properly for about 4 years. All of that went away, and I'm doing the best physically that I've ever been. Emotionally, mentally, I'm thinking 3 times faster than I mean, that's a rough metric. I can't quantify that, but I'm thinking way faster than I used to. I'm happy almost all the time. Granted, this formula has its fluctuation dips. When you spike your metals too high, you start to experience minor symptoms, but for the most part, I just feel great. And I posted this online, and now we've got a bunch of daredevils who are starting to feel the same thing when done correctly. And here we are.
Yeah, awesome. And I remember when you first posted it online, like I know you weren't trying to do this, you were just being honest, but like you positioned it in a way that was very compelling and I can see why it took off. And it's because you were saying very honestly, this is the only thing I'm doing for my health. And in fact, everything else in terms of my lifestyle is not good. And so, would you mind sharing what your lifestyle is like, and also why you kind of, despite being in one way obsessed with health, as much as anyone watching this, you stick to this lifestyle.
So I don't think I would have ever pushed as hard as I did to figure this out. Like, I mean, this wasn't just like a fun experience for me of just trying different nutrients and hoping for the best. This was desperation to get out of the hell that I was in. Just the emotional torment, the physical torment, and not just myself. And even if it would just myself, I don't know if I would have done it. But I watched my sister decline, and I watched my dad struggle with his health, particularly the fatigue portion. And so I was determined, not just for myself, but for my family, to figure this out because I was like, my dad's done so much for me in my life. He's bailed me out of so many jams. He's fixed my car multiple times. Like he's done so much for me. And I thought if there's one thing I can give the guy, it's a solution to this problem of him not being able to get out of bed, you know, most of the day, of him just not feeling well. And so but he's also the biggest skeptic I've ever met in my life. And so I started realizing if I needed to keep these controls in my life where I'm smoking a lot, I do smoke a pack a day and I have since I was 19 years old. If I were to quit smoking and start working out while doing this process, his skeptic mind would have been, it's not the HG7, it's the working out and quitting smoking, and that's not going to work for me. So I had to keep these controls, and I kept smoking throughout my life, and I kept eating very poorly, and I do eat very poorly. I eat fried food most of the time. I love fries. I love chicken strips. I love hamburgers. I eat that most of the time, and maybe I would
And
try a little harder. Sorry, go
a
ahead.
hamburger can be healthy in some contexts, but tell us, give us an idea of what you ate yesterday, just as an example, or today, or whatever.
My dinner yesterday was I DoorDashed Wendy's. I
And what did you
very
have for
oh I had
those watching who are Wendy's aficionados?
oh yeah, I had French fries, 2 burgers, and a large lemonade. And and considering how much soda I drink, lemonade was an upgrade.
What kind of soda do you normally drink?
Oh man, I love Dr. Pepper and I love Sprite. I and also while I would love to say that um, I only do this for the protocol, I mean I do love soda, but taking a bunch of pills with water is really, really disgusting. And this protocol calls for like 30 plus pills at a time if you do the full version, which I do. And so I just realized that I much prefer doing this with a little pop, a little soda, a little carbonated kick. So it kind of kills the gag that I get from taking 30 pills at a time because I do take like a handful and just chuck them in. And I'm not doing these individually. I'm doing 30 pills at a time in my mouth, and I don't recommend trying that if you're not an expert at expert at that. But yeah, I would do that with
And for
soda.
those,
And sorry, go ahead.
sorry, just before we go on to the next thing, yeah, for those who don't want to or can't drink soda, I use kefir normally, fermented like milk drink. That works quite well as well. If you don't like fermented, you could just use milk. I think there are some other options than soda, but
Yeah,
that's
I
fair
mean,
enough. That's what
orange
you like.
juice is fine, I'm sure, but like just,
Juice, yeah.
Um, so yeah,
But yeah, I think yeah, that makes sense. All right, so sorry, just want to like carry on really digging into your lifestyle before we show these test results. So what about exercise? What's your exercise protocol, if any?
so I mean, to be transparent to the max, when I was in high school, up until my early 20s, I worked out religiously. I ran outside every day, I lifted weights, and then towards my mid 20s, I could not do that anymore. Like my body would shut down. I would get nauseous just from trying, and it would like I would just shut down. And so for the last 6 years, for the last 8 years, or no, 6, I haven't done any exercise whatsoever. I work a sedentary desk job. I'm an analyst, a very, very data science analyst. I get to build data tools for my job, and so I don't move around that much. And I live, I get my groceries delivered. I mean, like I've been purposefully sedentary for this process because I wanted to serve as a control later on, but in the beginning it was because I couldn't move. Um, and so, yeah, for the last 6 years, no exercise whatsoever. However, there is the caveat that I was exercising a lot late teens, early 20s. But again, that ceased after 25 for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's 9 years ago then.
Well, I mean, I still tried a little bit of exercise between, I mean, right after that, like it was the extreme exercise ceased by the time I was 25. From 25 to 27 or so, I was still trying to like mildly hit the gym, but it wasn't anything close to what I was, what I was doing in my earlier days. And then eventually I just gave
And do
up.
you walk? Because I know some Americans just don't walk at all. Are you one of them? Like, how many steps a day do you think you
I
do?
walk to the 7-Eleven that's close to my house to buy more cigarettes.
And how many minutes away is that?
I mean, oh man, 3 minutes.
Oh, very close. Okay, so probably less than 1,000 steps a day by the sound of it.
I mean,
Okay.
sometimes I might walk a little bit more at my job, but it's nothing significant. Certainly far less than the average American.
Wow, which is saying something. Okay. And so, all right, so we've done smoking, we've done diet, we've done exercise. What about sleep? Do you make sure you get 8 hours uninterrupted sleep at
Absolutely
night?
not. I have a job that is very mentally demanding, and I'm often up till midnight every night working, or So I mean, and I wake up at 6 in the morning, so I get 6 hours at best. At best, most nights I get about 4 for the last 3 years.
Right. Okay. And I suppose the last thing that they normally talk about with lifestyle is stress. Do you meditate? Do you do things to be relaxed and calm?
Why do you think I
And
smoke? That's what I do. I don't. When I tell you that I don't do anything positive for myself except, theoretically HG7, I really don't do anything good for myself. And that started out because it was just comfortable. Now it's because I have to keep the control. Like I actually kind of would like to go to the gym, but if I start doing that before I get the right data here, like every skeptic in the world is gonna be like, "Oh, it's because you started working out." I'm like, "No, I just spent the last 15 years doing something very extreme."
So you're obviously very committed to this. You might say, well, it's easy to just eat junk food and not exercise, Owen. But I actually don't think that's true. I think the more energy you get and the more healthy you are, it's actually difficult not to move. That's my theory on it.
One of the most interesting things is that like soda has become a little too sweet, and I only do it to swallow pills, but like I'm kind of getting sick of soda. I'm getting sick of fried food. I'm getting sick of eating poorly. And like I kind of like, the salad at work. I kind of like the healthy options that they have in our little cupboard at work where they stock up with a bunch of organic stuff. I'm kind of starting to get into that, but I can't do it too much because again, it'll remove the control of what I'm doing here. Um, but yeah, as soon as I've got that data, I'm gonna.
Well, we've got an important step on the way, right? So, you had a lot of people say, a lot of people worry that the amounts of things that you're recommending were going to be dangerous. And of course, everyone is different and everyone is responsible for their own decisions and their own outcomes. But I think a lot of people are saying to you that, you are doing damage to yourself, significant damage. And you acknowledge that you were, before you got this formula right, you ended up in hospital. Um, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, a year ago when you started publishing your protocol, people were saying, "Oh, that amount is really damaging you and messing you up." And a lot of people were saying, we would like to see some tests to show that that is not the case. And when you and I spoke about it, I said, well, I understand a lot of your reservations about testing and, like standard lab blood tests, for instance. And it is true that they are only a snapshot in time. So I said, what about a DNA methylation test? I think as much as anything is accepted by mainstream science, science and the medical community, as to showing if you are prematurely aged, or the opposite, if you are actually younger than you should be. Your biological age is less than your chronological age. So just to explain those two terms, biological age means, let's say, if it was an autopsy or something, and we were to take your cells and try and work out how old you are just based at looking at your genetics, right? Without actually having any documentary evidence as to how old you are. If we had to guess how old you are by looking at the level of DNA methylation, which is the best kind of thing that we've got right now to be able to estimate, aging, full stop, on a cellular genetic level. And so the biological age is how old we'd guess you are looking at that, and then chronological age is how old you actually are. So some people are a lot younger seeming, some people a lot older, obviously most people are in the middle. And so I said, why don't we do that? And then if we use another company, there's a few different companies that do it. The company that we ended up using, which we're not going to promote heavily because we had some customer service issues with them, but we'll say it was True Age. They give not just that marker, they also tell you telomere length, which is another thing that is considered to be one of the things that indicates aging. They also give you a pace of aging, which shows not just where you are right now, but like how fast they think you will age on an ongoing basis. And then they actually do a review of a lot of different organ systems of the body, and if those are where those are in terms of biological age versus chronological age. So I said, that's probably the best, most reliable mainstream thing. I know you have some other of your fans who recommend other things like hair mineral analysis, and I'd love to see a general bloods panel. I admit it, but I do acknowledge your objection to that, which is it can vary so massively depending on the circumstances. So we settled on this DNA methylation panel, and it took a long time, but we finally got your results back. So is there anything you want to say about any of that before we actually share them?
Well, and thank you for your patience, but this is the first test that I've done since starting HG7. Like I've always relied on how I felt to tell me, um, how this was going, because the good feelings that I would feel were so profound. I mean, I've taken supplements my whole life, and I've never felt such a good, not just euphoric, but I've said this metaphor before, but when I started this protocol, it felt like like internally, like I was a foot that was in a shoe that was too small. My body had felt like condensed. My bone structure felt condensed. like pressure. There was just so much pressure within. And I started taking this supplement protocol, and that pressure started to release so significantly that I never really tested this. And I was afraid to test for a long time because I thought, I don't want to jinx this good feeling that I've got. And I've just got this bad feeling that if I test, it's going to ruin that. And I didn't want to ruin that. And so this is a very significant milestone because it is my first test. And not only is it my first test, it is, well, we're gonna see in a second here, but it is pointing to the direction that what I'm theorizing is close to accurate, or at least in the right direction. So that's positive news. And so I'm really excited today.
That's typical man theorizing, by the way. It's amazing, like how many men don't want to go to the doctor because they don't want to be told anything bad. It's like they'd rather just not know. So I guess it shows again that the manliness is increasing in you that you feel that way.
Well, and the other piece is that I would go to doctors routinely back when I was in high school and early 20s, like, please find something
and
wrong
they
with me because I don't
and they
feel
would tell
good.
you you were fine.
And they would tell me I was absolutely fine. You know, my iron levels looked fine. And of course, they would only do like a basic blood panel, test. They weren't going to do a deep tissue analysis. They weren't going to go do these crazy expensive tests because why? If the blood's showing fine, why would they do the extra work there? It's not good for it's obviously not going to be good for their, liability. It's not going to be something that I would be enjoying experience. A deep tissue analysis is rather painful from what I hear. Um, so anyway, there's just, getting deeper tests to prove my protocol or prove my theory was just impossible because doctors A didn't believe me, and B, the blood didn't tell the story at the time. And so that's also why I theorized that these metals weren't in the blood. They're in the tissues, and they won't be in the blood until you surface them. And so that we're well,
I think that's true, and I think from the perspective of zinc, copper, and iron that you're talking about, yeah, you can get indications by looking at the bloods. Like for instance, you might be happy to know that my iron in my blood is lower in the last couple of months than it ever has been in testing. So that's probably a positive sign that there's less building up in my body in general. But it's not definitive, as you say. The only way you really know is to do a tissue biopsy. There is a liver biopsy. I was recently interviewing someone else, and they said there is something called a ferroscan, where they do an MRI of your liver to see the level of iron building up in your liver, which is one of the tissues that would be most likely to build up in as a toxic metal. So that's interesting. I may get to that at some point.
if I could interject there. So, I mean, real quick bullet point, but I actually don't even think it's the liver where most of the iron is storing. I think that's like a middle, it's like a checkpoint for iron detoxification or iron, but it's not like the zinc receptors could be anywhere in the body. So I actually don't think even looking at the liver alone is enough. Like I think it could be in the brain, it could be in the bone marrow, it could be everywhere.
And it is, but what I'm saying is, if we take any other animal, which you are allowed to, take cut into pieces and measure each part of them. Like for instance, if I wanted to increase my iron from a food source, the spleen would be the number one source that I could get iron. Say if I wanted to get the highest source from a cow, the second highest would be the liver. So it generally tends to be a place where iron accumulates more than anywhere else in animals anyway, in sheep and cows and goats and pigs and all the rest of it. So I would be surprised if humans are that massively different. Now, I'm not dismissing what you're saying though, because the accumulation in the liver is nowhere near as dangerous and debilitating from a health and longevity point of view as the accumulation in, say, the brain. So you could say it's more significant.
Yeah, it's a better way to say it is that I'm not saying that there is no accumulation in the liver. Certainly a large, site for it, but I think that small amounts of it are blocking in other areas of the body which have a more profoundly negative impact on you as just like overall as a person.
I agree,
Which
but I was saying like seeing the level build up of the liver would give an indication of the cumulative build up over the whole body. So I'm looking forward to doing that as well. Maybe that's something that you want to do at some point. Once you really feel like you are I don't know, you've cleared the large amount of the backlog of the iron, you can actually test that to prove it.
We'll see. Yeah, and I have no idea how long this process is supposed to take. I have no idea when I'll be done, but it's actually like the indicator that I'm looking for on when this is over is when I can take B6 and nothing happens. Every B vitamin and vitamin C, even when you reach the point, like your body has a cap for all of these, and when you reach that cap, it just stops doing anything. Even though I call for a massive amount of biotin, that is because your body is using massive amounts of biotin during this process. But if you were to take that same amount of biotin outside of this process, your body wouldn't absorb it all. You would clump under your tongue and it would stay there until it is dissolved out. Um, but the what I'm the difference, the exception to all of those vitamins is B6. Even though these other vitamins stop doing things when I take too much of it, B6 seems to continue to work, which most people would say, would tell you that's because it's toxic. And I'm going to argue as a theoretical that it's not because it's toxic per se. It's that your body needs it so much that it's willing to take it in and extract all these toxic things out of you because it wants that B6 really bad. Like it wants it so bad that it's willing to cause these toxic effects because it's using it to extract metals from your tissues, but that's only a piece of this pie. It's only a piece of the puzzle. It doesn't do the full thing. So it's extracting tons of metals, which it does want to do, and your body is thanking you for, while you still have a bunch of other parts of the process to complete now. So you've now caused neuropathy because you've surfaced so much darn metal into your blood and liver that it's short-circuiting your electrical signals. And you got to get rid of that metal, and then the electrical signals will return. Anyway, so I dived off there, but that's I just wanted to say like that is what I'm looking for is in terms of when I'm done is when I can take that B6 as well as everything else, as all the other vitamins, and it does nothing. I don't know when
Well,
that will
fair enough.
be.
And maybe at that point, you can do an MRI scan, maybe of your whole body, and see how much iron is left in there as a
Because you,
way of
you
trying
got
to
to
prove
remember,
it.
based on the analogy I gave, B6 is the guy going into the tissues. But B6 is an aggressive worker. He's going to go in and he's going to tear and thrash around in these tissues, pulling at least that's what we theorize. That it's thrashing and tearing, literally tearing your tissues to pull these metals out. Biotin is the cleanup crew that keeps those tissues repairing and rejuvenating, as well as a little bit of zinc to keep that going, is what we think is going on. That's why we think so much biotin is needed because of how much damage B6 is doing to do the job it needs to do. It's thrashing around these tissues to get those metals out. Well, you've got all this leftover damage. Biotin goes and cleans it up, along with the rest of the formula. But biotin's a big worker there. Anyway, so let's continue before I get too deep into the little pieces.
If you've been thinking to yourself recently, not even eating that much, why am I still gaining weight? This message is for you. Hi, I'm Elwood Robinson. Most people don't realize insulin resistance is quietly turning more and more of what you eat into stored fat, even when portions are small. That's why Dr. Miriam Mikitsky and I created the Hormetics Weight Optimization System, and our most popular formula is the Insulin Balance Formula. It contains precisely chosen quantities of berberine, fenugreek, zinc, and folate, proven in studies to help your cells hear insulin again so your body burns those calories instead of storing them as fat. Go to advancedhealthgenetics.com/insulin, order now, and you'll be invited to join our clinical study the moment you check out at no extra cost, so you can track exactly how much better you feel. Use code REJUVENATE for 20% off now. Go to advancedhealthgenetics.com/insulin and remember to use the code REJUVENATE for 20% off now. It's an interesting theory, and I haven't heard very good explanations as to why so many people seem to have signs of low B6 and then respond poorly when they take it. So it's as good a theory as any that I've come across to actually explain that phenomenon. So yeah, it's great. Okay, the one other thing I want to address is for, you might see an ad for my own advanced health genetics in this episode. Why did I not start with that, Jacob? Because that's a reflection of where you start, and that's the same throughout a person's life. That's really not what we were trying to assess with Jacob. If we were trying to assess, I don't know, is he more susceptible to zinc deficiency or something like that, then we'd use the test like advanced health genetics. But what we were really looking at doing here is addressing, is this protocol dangerous? Is it actually beneficial? And has it helped Jacob to achieve exactly what his goal was, which is to replenish the zinc and have an anti-aging effect on a cellular and even DNA level? That's kind of what I heard him say a year ago when we first started talking, and so that's what we're assessing here. I hope that makes sense. So let me share my screen. The true age report. So I've cut this off just at the point of Jacob's full name is directly above here. He doesn't want to share that. But you can see age 34. So if we go down to this key point here, so chronological age 34.1, that means you recently had a 34th birthday, Jacob. I think I missed that. Congratulations. Happy birthday. Actually, that was probably October. That was months ago. But anyway, and your omic M age is the 30.8. So what it shows is, despite the fact that you at least at some point in the past, like, almost wrecked your body with doing the wrong version of this protocol, as you said, back when you were 31, despite having a very poor lifestyle for really a very long time, but as you say, especially the last 6 years, where you even removed any exercise or real movement from what you were doing, despite 20 packs a day, despite having levels of all these things that other people are telling you are dangerous, like EGCG and all the rest of it, you are still genetically significantly about 10% younger than your actual age. So if we read what it says here, your omic M age is a deep reflection of your biological age, considering the effects of lifestyle, environment, and genetics in your DNA in the aging process. I won't read the whole thing. It's basically saying what I already said earlier. So this is a reflection of, again, if they were to guess your age just by looking at your cells and they had no other information, they would guess that it is 31. So how did that feel to see that, Jacob?
Well, considering that I don't do anything else, in fact, I do things actively that should be aging me faster. I mean, this says negative 3.3 years, but really, for the adjusted age I should be, it's more like negative 10. So I don't know.
I would
I
agree.
feel really good.
I would agree. I would say, given the level of bad things that you not just have done to yourself, but continue to do to yourself on an ongoing basis, it is more than average. And so, yeah, for you to have a age that's less than average is significant. I mean, let's put it this way: if I had your lifestyle, there's no way I feel like I would get this result.
What's sad is I don't know if I would have gotten this result 5 years ago, but there's no way to know. So having no baseline kind of is sad. I would say that's where I'm most upset about it. I don't have a baseline to compare to of historical, but you know, there's enough data out there to say that a smoker my age that's been smoking a pack a day since 19, who eats fast food, fried food, and doesn't exercise, there really isn't much data out there that would point to anybody having results like this. So that's exciting.
And doesn't sleep well. You said 4 to 6 hours a night. Yeah, and doesn't do anything to mitigate stress. I mean, those are like the 5 things that most people in the health and biohacking community would say that you need to be on top of, right? It's your exercise, your diet, your sleep, your stress. Oh, was there another thing? Maybe 4 things. Anyway, so and you're doing none of any of those. So if we continue, there were no results over time. As you said, that's your biggest regret. So you're going to carry on doing this protocol. You're going to do it again at some point. I think that's your plan, right? 6 months or a year or something like
I'd
that.
like to do it again within a 6 to 12 month time frame, depending on just what time allows and whatnot. Don't worry, I'll pay for it this time. Now that I'm happy with these results, I'll do it again.
Awesome. Well, we can discuss the practicalities, but it's good that you want to do it again and you want to see the level of progress that you make. Um, and then, so there's the symphony age. And so this is looking at different organ systems. And so basically, this is the same thing again as what we just did, but the previous result was for your whole body. This is for the different organs and systems in your body. which is interesting as well. So we can see first we have here the blood, the health of or the aging of the blood, of the brain, inflammatory markers. And by the way, we're looking at kind of the abbreviated report here first. We'll probably go to the advanced report that gives more detail as well, but we might skim that a bit. We'll go through every result in this abbreviated report. So all of these looking at least 1, 2, 3, 4 years young, no, 2, 3, 4 years younger than your actual age. Again, not massive if you were, I don't know, as committed to your health as me, but quite significant in terms of lifestyle stuff, but quite significant given that you're the opposite. Quite impressive. So the only two here that were really older, just to skip ahead in a second, is the heart and the lungs. My theory on that, as soon as I saw that, is just that's the smoking. Like, if you smoke a pack a day, it's going to have a negative effect on your heart and your your lungs and your circulatory system. That's the whole reason. Like, for instance, that they say that diabetes and smoking are the two risk factors for like gum disease, for instance, where the gums recede. It's just because there's not enough circulation getting to the extremities. So pretty much the worst thing you can do for your extremities is to either be diabetic or to smoke large amounts of cigarettes, and you are doing the latter. So it's not a surprise to me that the lungs and heart are a bit worse, but it's very interesting to see that they're the only ones, and that all
Well,
these other things that people are worried about. Sorry, let me finish. Just finish and then with the liver and the kidneys and all the things that people are like, oh, you're damaging them by taking all this EGCG or all the rest of it. That all of those are actually showing as younger.
yeah. Well, I wanted to interject on the blood, on the heart and the lungs specifically, is that yes, the smoking obviously is going to play a role there. But what I find fascinating about the side effects that I get from this protocol, the most obvious ones that I get are usually impaired breathing. So like I'll get or wheezy breathing, if then and my chest pain. Those two symptoms are the most frequent, and they come up because either A, my iron is too high, or B, my one of my nutrients is too low, one of my vitamins is too low. And it's always the heart and the labored breathing and the chest pains. Those are the two symptoms I always get. So it's weird. It's interesting to see that the heart and the lungs are the two that have aged more.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly if you could make the argument for the heart, I guess, with because the metals, the iron would be pulled into the circulatory system, which would then directly affect the heart. So yeah, you can make the argument for the heart. I think it's a bit more of a stretch for the lungs to say it would be primarily heavy metal detoxification. But yeah, it's interesting. It's also interesting that the one you have the best scoring of all out of the 11 that they pick here is hormones, when that was kind of the primary thing that you started taking zinc for in the first place, right?
Well, and even funny, I find the liver the funniest because
Yes, me too.
of all the critiques I get online, especially from those who are the deepest into this space, this field, you could say, every single person that is a critique of mine always goes attacks the liver portion, the portion of EGCG. A lot of people, you could justify maybe some of the B vitamin amounts. Some people would probably argue heavily against the B6. Some people might say it's fine. Some people might say it's too much C. Some people might say it's fine. But almost every single person looks at that EGCG amount, which is around 5 grams at this point per standard dosage, which that is a lot. They all tell me that I'm going to destroy my liver. And I've been taking progressively more and more amounts of EGCG on this protocol since I started. It was very early on that I had deduced that I wanted to reduce my iron. The trick was getting rid of copper with that, which I struggled with for a long time until I found out molybdenum. But I was pretty dead set on getting iron out of the body. And so I've been taking EGCG for a very long time, long before the complex was figured out. Um, and so I've been taking at least, on average, 5 grams a week and right now it's closer to 10 grams a week, but averaged out over the course of my life, probably around 3 to 5 grams a week of EGCG, which is well above what they would say would cause liver issues. So the fact that my liver is actually one of the best indicators here, and my kidneys, after I spent after this whole process began, like was finally figured out from the lowest point of my life of being in the hospital with bloody kidneys, and I take 30 pills a day and drink them with soda, and my kidneys are younger. That's that's more than a coincidence. Or that has to be. That's just to me that's just no other way than what than evidence to support that what I'm doing is uh,
At least safe for you,
safe,
right? That's
at least
proven.
safe for me.
Yeah.
Now, I want to get a little bit. I'll let you have a little bit more say here, but I do want to get into, my theory about who this is for, whether or not this is for everyone. I do want to speak a little bit to that, but we'll get that in a little bit.
We'll definitely do that, but let's finish your own results first,
Yeah,
I say.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
okay. Okay. So yeah, for people who are like, oh, just because this says that his liver and kidneys are fine, I don't believe it, blah blah blah. Okay, fine. I want you to understand though, with they're taking blood sample here, so they are looking, in order to come to this conclusion, they are looking at the standard markers that someone would look to identify the liver. They don't present them here, but they're looking at GGT, they're looking at ALP, ALT, they're looking at EGFR, they may be looking at cystatin, I don't know, but they're looking at the classic markers to come up with these. So I just want to say that. Plus, to me, the fact that the lungs are the worst, or joint the worst, kind of is indicative that it is accurate, right? It's like he's smoking 20 a day, so his lungs are a bit taxed. That's what you'd expect. That's what I'd expect. I never thought that the EGCG was, definitely so terrible for the liver. I understand if you look at it in Google or ChatGPT or whatever people use to try and ascertain truth in this day and age, it will say that if you take more than 400 milligrams, which is zero point 0.4 grams, that it is dangerous for the liver. But I'm not hugely surprised by this. I never was, convinced by that. I was convinced though with the idea that if you smoke large amounts of cigarettes every day for over a decade, that it's going to stress your lungs. So everything here fits for me.
I do want to say on the EGCG, because it would be wrong for me to say that you can take 5 grams of EGCG on its own. If you were to do that, you will cause, like, I've no doubt in my mind you will cause liver damage. Just want to say that very clearly. I do
Yeah, you're right to
believe
add that. Yeah, we
EGCG
covered it in previous
can,
episodes, but
yes. I don't want to sit here and tell you 5 grams of EGCG won't cause you liver problems. It will, absolutely, if you don't do it with the rest of this protocol, which even then, obviously, I can't say that 100% factually that it won't, but I'm confidently, with at least with myself, clearly with this data, it's not. So,
yeah.
um,
Yeah, thank
I'll
you for
end with
adding that.
that.
You're right. We covered it in other episodes where people might not have seen it. Yes, I'm saying that I was convinced it would be fine within the context of Jacob's protocol. If someone just took it on its own, it could be a problem.
The other thing that's interesting, and I know you hate ChatGPT, but I asked ChatGPT anyway. I said, "What? I want you to simulate a person, a Caucasian 34-year-old male, in my conditions in life. I want you to simulate what kind of results they would get without HG7, just like all the things that I do, just assuming that I don't take these supplements." And it said that I should have aged significantly more in my lungs than I did. Like, I did age. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's doing damage. I'm not trying to hide that, but the damage is contained and minimal compared to what it could have been. Like, I mean, we're talking a significant smoker. I mean, a pack a day is a light estimate, really, considering if I ever go out, I mean, back in earlier day, I don't do this much anymore, but I would go to the bars, I'd go drink, and when you drink, you smoke more. And I would smoke a lot when I drank.
And don't you also smoke cannabis, which is hotter and actually more damaging to the lungs?
That's what they say. But yeah, I mean, and if you include the cannabis, we're talking a lot, like we're talking a lot, a lot of smoke.
We're talking about a lot of lung damage. Yeah.
And so the fact that I've only aged upwards of at most 6 extra years, I mean, it should be more like 10 to 16 years. considering how much I've smoked and how little I've exercised. So not to
I
say
think
that
that's
it's
probably
good.
reasonable.
Yeah, not to say that what I'm doing is good, not or that it's canceling out any damage, but it appears that it is certainly mitigating a lot more of it than it could be
And
without
of course, if you
HG7.
are yes, and of course, if you're stressing the lungs and the circulatory system, that really has a knock-on effect on every other organ system, and you're not seeing that. So it's good. So this one's really interesting. Tuned in pace of aging. So this is actually probably the only score you've got that's not as good as mine. Actually, the last time I did it, which is so the
Not
pace of
yet.
aging is saying not yet, but of course, again, I was not doing any of the things that you're doing in terms of lifestyle. So I get that. I'm just saying, I acknowledged earlier that your biological age was better than mine, despite doing all that stuff. This is not as good. So the pace of aging is, but anyway, it's not as good as mine, but it is still good and it's still better than average. So the pace of aging, what that means is based on what it's seeing. In 10, let's say 10 years from now, how many years does it think you'll have aged biologically? And it's saying 9. That's what this basically means. So you're aging less quickly biologically than you are chronologically, which again is not super impressive on its own, but is pretty impressive when you think of your lifestyle.
And I really wish I could have seen that figure just before I started. That would have been it would have been a lot easier for me to speak in a lot of confidence here, but I will say I'm very interested to see how that figure fluctuates as we progress. So we'll see what happens in a year with that one. I won't speak more on that until I see the change.
I think Brian Johnson, who spends, was it 2 million a year or something on it, like his was it 0.65, but it's the same as almost mine was. I was really surprised like how good mine was. But then again, my telomeres weren't very good. So I don't know. I think it showed I've had a lot of damage through my previous lifestyle as well, which is probably similar to yours. And then lead toxicity and all the rest of it, all the stuff I've talked about before, which I won't turn this episode into talking about me. But I think it showed that because I'm doing so much in terms of lifestyle now, that it was having a good effect. And I did say to Jacob, in our private conversations, I said, I hope that you get to a point where you feel fully vindicated with this protocol. So then you also start doing everything lifestyle wise to improve your health. And then you can show, what's really possible. So you said you
I
were
need that
open to that
last little bit of
eventually.
proof. I need to see improvement. I need to see from a start point, and then I need to see another year's worth of data while doing all these terrible things. If I see better improvements, if I see better metrics in most of these areas, especially if I see better metrics in the lungs and heart, I will have my proof that I need, and I will actively work to do better in some of my life behaviors because now I can actually go to people and say, nope, it's not the exercise. I promise. I mean, exercise does help, good diet does help, but I don't need that to show that this works.
Yep. And then you can have a new goal of beating Brian Johnson's score while not spending 2 million a year, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, this
Okay.
protocol probably is $100 a month if you're really going hard at it, depending on if you're able to source biotin correctly. I think that's the hardest one for a lot of people. But other than that, I spend no more than $50 a month, but I'm only doing it like 3 times a week at this point.
Yes. And then it's just making a point here that if your pace is greater than 1, it's associated with 50% increased risk of death. So that's pretty significant, right? And of course, it's lower in your case. But I'm just saying that this particular score is very predictive statistically um, of risk of death and chronic disease, and yours is lower, so that's great. All right, so this is just a more detail of. In fact, yeah, this might be actually useful to go to, so you can see, because people might be like, oh, it just says 2 years younger for liver or something like that. What does that actually mean? Well, it does list here the different things that they measure. So in the case of liver, albumin, ALP, ALT, AST, bilirubin, total protein. So pretty much other than GGT, all the things that that a practitioner would normally test. Oh, it does actually have cystatin C here for kidney, right, which is the more reliable measure of kidney health more than creatinine. And again, so, and you can see with the immune system, there's a massive amount of different things that it's measuring here, including, CD4, CD8, all this kind of stuff.
I
So,
forget. Did this show like hemoglobin and all that stuff? Did it show ferritin and all that? Because I know a lot of people online like to look at
yep,
those
yep.
figures.
Here we go. Blood. So ferritin, hematocrit, hemoglobin, mean corpuscular hemoglobin, all of that kind of stuff. Mean plate cell distribution width. So yeah, again, it doesn't tell you what all of those figures are, but it tells you that based on their algorithm and calculations and all the rest of it, your level of those indicates. If they had to guess, again, that's always the idea of this. If they had to estimate your age based on looking at these markers, this is what they would estimate. So yeah, nothing that bad there, obviously. And yeah, homocysteine. Yeah, so there's a lot. There's a lot that they're measuring here, is my understanding. And so, okay, so pace of aging. We've talked about that already. A lot of that is based on the immune system. Is my understanding.
Yeah, which if we look at what my immune system like biomarkers, they're all of them are at reasonable ranges except for was it the monocytes there, which you said was the EGCG?
Yeah, and then this potentially, and then this one, the CD4 to CD8. So this is like, if it's low, it means your immune system's underactive. If it's high, it means it's overactive. So to be honest,
I think
this
it was
one I
just I
could
think I
actually.
just got a flu before I took this test, so that might have been why.
Oh, okay. Well, that would definitely be why then. Yeah, and that would also explain why your neutrophils are high, actually. Yeah, fair enough. All right. Well, that was maybe not best time to test the immune system, but anyway, that wasn't what we were doing. We were testing DNA, so that's fine. Yeah, telomere length. This is interesting as well. So yours is good. It's above average. Do you know what telomeres are?
Yeah, yeah, they're little strands on the end of your DNA that's supposed to dictate like cell division, right?
Yeah, the caps. Yeah, they used to say this was like the best way of measuring the level of DNA aging, and then since then, DNA methylation is considered more credible. But it's still
Th-
it's a
I
it's still good.
I have a theory that I don't know where the right place to plug this into is, but so they say men peak like in their early to mid 30s, right? Like physically, you kind of peak as a male early to mid 30s. Women is more younger, it's like mid 20s, right? Um, or so. So I wonder if I mean just a more of a guess or a question really, but I wonder if HG7 isn't necessarily just like de-aging me, or rather versus bringing me back to the peak. So if you're like at your peak, it's not going to make you younger, but if you're over your peak, like age 50, 40, or whatever, it's like reversing you back to that mid 30s. Like I don't know if HG7 would ever take me to a point where I'm like 14, but it might keep me at like the peak of 30 years old-ish. Like in debt, like that's my theory or question is, will it keep me here at this level continuing no matter how old I get? Which we won't know until I get the data following years. But that's the question I have, is it's not going to make me a 14-year-old. It's going to keep me a 30-year-old.
That's a good question. I can't remember. I've got vague memories, but I don't want to say it wrong. But yeah, maybe. Generally people's peak is like mid-20s, like biologically. So yeah. Okay, and so now it's actually showing in this advanced report like your levels of more individual test markers. Like this is RDW. Usually it will show up in the test. Albumin, fasting glucose, all
The
that kind of
fasting
stuff.
glucose is interesting considering just how poor my diet actually is. We were
Yeah,
talking
that
like
yours is a
five
little
cans of soda a day.
yours is a little bit lower than average. I mean, glucose varies throughout the day, and I'm not sure when you took the test, but there's an A1C, which is supposed to be a measure of the last 3 months. It's much more of an average here somewhere, and that one also was surprisingly low given your sugar intake. Hemoglobin being high-ish shows that you're obviously not, depleting too much iron. Oh yeah, here we go. The A1C. That's what I was
Well,
just
hold
mentioning.
on, hold
Yeah,
on. Before you get into that, the fact that it's still high-ish and it shows that I'm not depleting that much. I'm taking 5 to 15 grams of EGCG a week, and it's still showing that figure. Like that should be, if nothing else, cause for discussion about how much iron is truly in our body. Because it's not like I'm taking all this EGCG and it's doing nothing. It's a very aggressive iron chelator. And so it's going to probably find some iron to chelate every time I take it. And it's still showing. I don't take any iron. I mean, I do eat red meat, but not a crazy amount. Like I do eat poorly, but I don't eat a lot. I eat maybe like one meal a day. And so I'm not like engorging myself with tons more iron. And so I'm taking all that EGCG and it's still showing that figure. Like that should be right there an indicator that we do have a ton of iron in our bodies. I don't know where it's coming from entirely, but it's there. Has to be.
I agree, and yeah, it's funny. One of the only things that every guest I've had on probably agrees with is that iron is a root cause of disease, and that too much builds up in the tissues. Everything else, everyone seems to agree on, including a guest that I've interviewed, but that'll probably come out after this episode, Morley Robbins, that again thinks that iron accumulation in the tissues is the root cause of all disease. That's his opinion on it. But yeah, it's funny. Every single guest I've had, that's probably the one thing that everyone agrees on is that we've got way more
Yeah,
iron in our
even
bodies
my
than we actually
worst
need.
skeptics, even my worst skeptics will agree that iron is a huge problem.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to have too little of it, except for if there's just imbalance, as you explained earlier. I do want to look at this. The HbA1c is what it's usually called in Europe. I think the Americans usually just call it A1C, although in this case they put HB. It's it's glycolated hemoglobin, and yeah, yours is well below. So that's interesting that your blood sugar is well below the average on average. And you said you only eat one meal a day, but I imagine you're drinking soda throughout the day, right? For the sake of
Maybe a
calories.
minute. I mean, moreover, just because I get thirsty, but yeah.
Well, I would say it's because your body's desperate for calories if you're only eating once a day and you're finding it in liquid form,
I
which
also
is
don't
fair
exert that much
enough.
energy though, so I don't know. I mean, maybe the one meal is plenty for the amount of activity that I actually do.
Your brain uses a lot of glucose. So, okay, so hematocrit, I'm just kind of skipping. Yeah, look at alkaline phosphatase. So, this is the one of the liver enzymes that you'd expect to be high in the case of liver struggling. It's actually low. Funny. Some of these are very obscure, like we don't normally test for them, but they're picking them because they're a good way of being able to measure the degree that someone's aging, like this one, carboxypeptidase. I've never seen anyone's carboxypeptidase results, but so that's why I'm just kind of skipping through some of these, see if there's anything else here interesting to me. Not really. Oh yeah, this one, androsterone sulfate. This is the only kind of masculine hormone that they are directly measuring in this, which I know is quite a preoccupation of yours. And sure enough, it's as it says here, it's downstream of testosterone reflects androgen activity. So androgen means to make manly, right? So it's testosterone is in fact more anabolic, it's more muscle building, whereas hormones like DHT and androsterone are more androgenic. So they're using this one to measure androgenic activity. And sure enough, look at that, you're in the top 10 percentile. So that's good. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I've always had, like, ever since I was young, my estrogen levels were pretty high, but it was also as a result because my testosterone levels were also really high. So I've always had like on the higher end of output of just hormones in general. So it doesn't actually surprise me that my androsterone is so high. What would I
Okay,
would
fair
really
enough.
have
All right.
loved to, what I would have loved to have seen with that is my estrogen or estradiol levels with that. That would have been interesting.
Well, it's not part of true age, but you can always do another blood panel that's like a hormone panel and just see what level these are. Now you've dipped your toe in the water.
Yep, now that I've stripped the fear of being possibly wrong, I mean, I mean, maybe I could still be wrong, but that true age was a huge confidence booster for sure.
You could be wrong about elements, and most of us are some of the time. But it's good to. This is why this is a good starting place because it's a really like holistic, big picture overview. More than even if you were to do a thorough blood panel of hundreds of markers. But as I say, the problem is it's more of a snapshot in time. This is obviously they've included those as a snapshot in time, but they've put it within the context of looking at the methylation markers, which are much less of a snapshot in time and much more of a cumulative aging marker. So I think this is a really good place to start. I think it's really positive. It's pretty much exactly in line with what I was expecting, as you and I were talking about earlier. Because if I thought I didn't think it was going to be really amazing, and I didn't think it was really going to be really bad. If I thought it was going to be slightly bad, I wouldn't have featured you on the show or helped to promote the system. I think the system is good. I think it works to some degree and for some people. And that brings me nicely into what you wanted to talk about. Go ahead. You said earlier you wanted to talk about who it can help and all the rest of
To
it.
to first or to respond a little bit to what you had just said, it may not be amazing by everyone's standards, like to compared to what some of those health gurus are putting out. But I achieved those figures doing absolutely nothing other than popping in a few pills a day.
Yeah, I
I
think
and
that's
I
very
and I
impressive.
do
And
mean
and by
I
the
do
way,
mean absolutely nothing.
oh, I don't think I quite clarified that. I said this at the beginning. I think one of the reasons it was so successful is because that's how and it was honest, positioned it. And everyone loves the idea of being able to be healthy while not doing any of the healthy lifestyle things.
Everyone wants to have their cake and eat it too. Everyone wants to be able to eat like eat whatever they want and not gain a pound. And I'm not saying that this is going to do that for you. You still have some level of accountability to yourself. Obviously, my lungs and heart are still a little bit aged compared to what they should be. However, I have, I mean, and the data supports this. I've essentially come up with a way to not have to destroy yourselves in the gym and spend all that time making these extremely healthy, dirty, tasting meals. And you can have the cheap burger a little more often. You can have the fries a little more often. You can drink the soda and not, I mean, um, I don't want to say if you're a diabetic, that's fine. I'm just saying if you're someone who is worried about sugar intake, this formula seems to be lets you be a lot more. It allows your body to be much more forgiving of things than you should be, apparently. And so I've come up with a way to basically have your cake and eat it too. Now, there was a huge cost in figuring this out. I had to nearly die 50 times to get to this point. And so, you could say I paid my dues to get that, but people who didn't do that get to enjoy, the luxury if they figure out the ratios, get to enjoy similar effects. Now, that leads also back into the point of who is this for and do I think it's for everyone? I'm going to tell you right now, I do think that everyone has a ratio of these nutrients that is beneficial for them. The problem is I don't think that ratio is entirely the same. I think that there is some people need a little bit less zinc. I actually found recently that I think women on this protocol struggle more, and I think it's because they need less zinc than men do. That's my theory, is they actually don't need as much zinc. And so a lot of the women that get on this have been getting on this protocol have had to quit because they started getting too much pains from it. And I think that's actually because they were taking too much zinc. So we found that at the very least there is a difference between the sexes on this protocol. I would guess that zinc is the biggest difference there. I don't think that the ratios are actually that much different. And in fact, for everyone, I don't think the ratios are that much different, but the smallest difference can still mean a big deal over a course of time. They're saying that 1 degree on a ship, while it's 1 degree now, in a mile or two, that 1 degree could result in a vastly different endpoint than where you would have been. And so if you're taking this protocol and you need just a tiny little bit less zinc or a tiny little bit less of something else, one dose you might not feel it. Over the course of 10 doses, you might start to feel that. And so, yes, I do think that everyone has just a slight, especially when it comes to starting points, I think that everyone has a different starting point. But I don't think that B6 pulls more metal for someone per milligram than it does for someone else. I don't think it works that way nearly as profoundly as some people might say. I don't think even the needs of biotin per B6 that you take is that much different. I think it's a similar ratio there. I think most of these are similar ratios per the other nutrient. So you're going to need a certain amount of EGCG per B6 that you take. You're going to need a certain amount of zinc per EGCG you take. But I think that number varies between men and women. I also think it can vary on how much your body's able to handle at once, depending on size if you're someone who's a smaller individual, you might not do so well with the max dose. If you're a larger individual, you might do a little better with the max dose. So there's little pieces like that. But I don't think there's any person in this world that zinc is poisonous to. And if there is, it's an anomaly. It's not. It's a mutation. Zinc is an essential nutrient. EGCG is another one where I don't think it's going to behave that much differently across all of us. I think it's going to act in a similar way. I think it's going to chelate a similar profile of metals. You might have more certain metals than others in certain areas. Like you might have more lead than someone else might have. But I don't think EGCG is just going to just flat out not chelate metals for someone where it chelates metals for another. I also, B6 I think operates the same, in all of us generally speaking. Maybe it might be different a little bit in men and women, but for most men, I think all of these nutrients act similarly, and the ratios are very similar. So anyway, I'm rambling again,
That's
but
good. Did you create a different protocol then for men and women? Is that live on the?
not yet. This is actually a very recent acknowledgement, I guess, because every single person that has failed on this protocol, well, I mean, I should say every female participant on this protocol has eventually quit, or most of them. I would say 90% of the females that have tried this protocol have decided to end it. We couldn't figure out why, and I have finally suspected towards the end of this protocol that I myself was taking too much zinc, and the symptoms that I was getting from that were similar to the symptoms they were describing. The women on this protocol were describing that they were getting too much pressure, too high iron, like it just couldn't handle. They would get nauseous. Like the symptoms of taking too much zinc result in a similar effect of being iron toxic because it's trying to push that iron out or it's trying to work against that iron, and so it kind of aggravates that iron. And so we found that reducing zinc helped correct a lot of those iron overload symptoms people are getting. So I am theorizing that because zinc, a lot of zinc for men is stored in the testes, and because women don't have testes, that very well could mean that women do actually need a little bit less zinc than men. It actually doesn't surprise me in the slightest. So I'm gonna test out a few updates to the forum protocol, like a side note for women saying, women try this amount of zinc instead, and see how that goes. And with that, a little bit different ratios.
Was that a surprise to you because the second person who really did this protocol, or second and third, was your sister and your girlfriend, right?
Yes,
So
but the ratios of what they were taking, like they were taking similar ratios to me, but they were always taking less what I was taking. So I'm wondering if because they were just simply taking less and not trying the full protocol, that they weren't experiencing nearly as much symptoms as some of these other women who were trying to get on the protocol and doing a full dose.
how
Um,
much less were they
so
taking?
about half. They were doing about half the protocol, just more frequently. Um, and also my girlfriend is not the most communicative person, and so sometimes she forgets to tell me when she does change certain things, and so I have to really dig it out of her. Hey, did you take it exactly the way I told you? And she lives in Poland, so um, it's hard to just watch her do this, but she does fluctuate like me. She's very smart, and so she can do this on her own. She doesn't need me holding her hand most of the time. And she doesn't say anything if she switches things up a little bit. So I'm finding out that she's, also taking a little bit less zinc than I was recommending. And I didn't really know that fully because it was so experimental in the beginning. She was taking larger amounts at first, but she just, this protocol is very experimental and you're going to have to play with it. I say that on the front page of this forum. If you're not willing to be experimental, if you are expecting to get on this forum and see a specific dose and take that specific dose every day. And if it doesn't work, it's going to cause problems. And you're not, and if that doesn't work and you're going to view it as a failure, then you probably will fail. if you're going to approach this as an experimental mindset and say, okay, here's the base standard protocol that they've got, and we've got all these calibration methods and symptoms that you can calibrate from, meaning um, sometimes people need a little bit more of something to balance out what they were low in, for example. Um, we've got symptoms that you can calibrate or match to our forum. So we've got like all the vitamin deficiency symptoms, all the mineral deficiency symptoms, the EGCG deficiency symptoms. We list them out. And the more symptoms you have for a particular one, you take more of a specific nutrient to balance out where you're at. And so,
And I encourage people to pay attention to those, by the way. One of the reasons I started seeing that there was credibility in what you were saying was that you kind of identified these correlations between different symptoms and different deficiencies, which I'd never seen anyone else make, and which seem to actually be accurate and helpful, which is awesome. And ditto for the emotional correlations between emotions and different deficiencies. And then even the taste testing thing is quite interesting. I don't know if it's, in my opinion and experience, always foolproof, but it is accurate way more often than you'd think. So it's definitely worth trying. It's definitely worth trying putting a little bit of each of these on your tongue and seeing what tastes good. And it is kind of it's worth trying and not just hearing about. I really recommend people actually try it because it is very hard to believe that you could put something on your tongue and one day it tastes disgusting and the next day it tastes like nice and sweet, you know? Like that's a very interesting phenomenon. I don't think you're the first person to talk about it. I remember reading a book by some mineral guy written decades ago who talked about the different minerals having different tastes depending on if you need them or not. But you're the first person I've seen who also addressed it in relation to these other nutrients as well, like the B vitamins. And again, it's a very useful technique.
it didn't work at first. Just, I mean, like if you're someone who's never taken vitamins before, I mean, all of them are going to have like a weird grainy taste to you. And especially things like EGCG that's just naturally very bitter. It's not going to taste very good. But as you start doing extreme levels of these vitamins, you start pushing your dose, your caps to the max, and then you actually when you especially when you get into like a nauseous state, if you try to take a nutrient when you're nauseous and you don't need it, you are going to gag like that. Like your gag reflex is just going to be like, no, I'm already nauseous. Please do not try to force this even more. I'm going to throw up. And most of the time, if you try to take something that makes you gag when you're nauseous already, you'll probably will throw up. However, every time, and it's never failed me, but some people don't have as much luck with it. When I am nauseous, there is always one nutrient, at least one nutrient, that does not trigger that gag reflex. And every time I take that one nutrient, it fixes the nausea. Anything else I try to take that triggers that gag reflex, if I take it, I'm going to throw up. But there's always one nutrient. It's usually EGCG, zinc, or molybdenum, which is why those are the top three calibration methods. If I'm low on one of those three and I take it, the nausea goes away almost immediately. And I do mean almost immediately. And what's even more fascinating is my tongue like readily allows me to swallow it. It's like, yes, please. My gag reflex is not triggered at all. My tongue autonomously like flips it to the back of my throat. But if I don't need it and I try to put it on my tongue, immediate gag. Like, it's the craziest thing. That is the only reason why I was able to figure this out. If it wasn't for that gag reflex, that what I call a taste test, it's more of a gag reflex check, but what I call taste test, if it wasn't for that taste test check, I would have never figured this out. I would have been, shooting into a blank. It never would have done it.
But it is beyond only gag reflex, right? Like sometimes these things that usually taste unpleasant actually taste sweet to you when you actually need them, which is very interesting.
Yep. Vitamin
Yeah.
C is one of the easiest ones to check that with, I've found, because it's naturally so tart. So when you need vitamin C, like for whatever reason, that tartness doesn't like register as much. And you didn't quite believe me until you tried it for yourself.
Uh, yes, I think I remember that, but the one I definitely remember on this subject is zinc because it's kind of traditionally known that zinc makes you nauseous in excess, and you were saying to me, I don't know, at some point I was nauseous, and you were saying try some zinc, and I was like, I cannot imagine ever trying zinc and being less nauseous, and in that case, it didn't work at all. But later on, there was a time where I felt nauseous, and I tried zinc, and it tasted good, and I took, I don't know, 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams of zinc, like enough to make most people nauseous, and it made me no longer nauseous. And I was like, damn, that is amazing. Another thing that Jacob is right about, that at least within some contexts, very large doses of zinc remove nausea. Who
In
would have
most
guessed?
in most cases, in the beginning of this protocol, uh, it actually usually was EGCG that people needed to fix the nausea. Because when I first posted this protocol, I had vastly underestimated how much EGCG was needed in this. I posted it with about half the EGCG that I actually needed to, and that's because I was never really doing full doses at once. I was always taking just little bits and pieces here and kind of trying to calibrate that to a single dose. And so I didn't realize how much extra EGCG I was taking during my initial trial of this because I was always calibrating with extra EGCG, and I thought, there's no way I need 5 grams per dose. That's ridiculous. Well, turns out you kind of do need about 5 grams per standard dose that we're on. Right now, we're at 250 milligrams of B6. I found that 300 is too much and 200 is too little. And because most B6 supplements that I find come in 100 milligram caps, I'm kind of forced to dance between the two. And so I'm constantly switching between 300 milligrams and 200 milligrams based on how I feel. I kind of stay on the upwards of 300, but it just the amount of iron that gets surfaced by taking that much B6 is staggering.
You know, you can just open up and tip away half
Yeah,
of
I
it.
know. I hate wasting things, and I just deal with it because in my mind I want that B6. I just have to do a little extra calibration with it. But some people don't want to do that extra calibration. So yeah, you can take the capsule open. You can do whatever you need there to do. But I take the 300, and then I take 1,000 milligrams of vitamin B5 with that pantothenic acid. So usually it's most B5 supplements you can find in 500 milligram caps. So two of those. And I don't really care about brand on those. I mean, as long as it's pantothenic acid, I know some brands are more potent than others. I just have never ever found a problem, no matter what brand I take, as long as it's the pantothenic acid there. Same with the pyridoxine hydrochloride. As long as it's those forms, I've never had a problem between brands.
Let me explain that a little bit. So, because ingredients like B5, B6, B7, and ascorbic acid are, well, especially B5, B6, B7 actually, are extremely cheap, like per dose. So, there's no reason why a company would, advertise 400 milligrams of B5 and only give you 200 milligrams because it's so incredibly cheap to just give you 400. I think with some ingredients, probably out of your formula, mainly the EGCG, but like certainly, more expensive ingredients, sometimes they underdose to save money. And it isn't even necessarily the company. Often companies go to manufacturers and they ask for a certain amount, and the manufacturer actually gives them a different amount if the company and the manufacturer are not the same company. So I think you're right. Basically, I think most B5 and B6 is going to be what it says, because why not?
Yep, for the vitamins specifically, I'm really not nearly as adamant about brand as I am form. Um, So vitamin B6, just it needs to be that pyridoxine hydrochloride. Do not do the P5P. I used to take P5P, and I would have swore to you that P5P was better than pyridoxine hydrochloride, and it usually is, except for this protocol specifically. Use the pyridoxine hydrochloride because you don't want it to work if it's too much. Um, if it's too like and active forms will work regardless. The whole point of this, the whole reason why you can take such excess of these vitamins and stuff is because B vitamins do have a cap on how much your body will intake at once, and it will pee out the rest. P5P won't pee out. It'll do what it's supposed to do, and in this level of P5P, you're asking for more trouble than it's worth. Um, and you can just cause all sorts of imbalances. So I do not recommend that. Anyway, so 250 milligrams of B6, roughly around there, between 2 and 300. Don't exceed 300. You don't need more than that. Don't go below 200. You'll cause problems, way too many problems. 1,000 milligrams of B5. And biotin, now this is huge. You have to get the pure powder, not the 1% diluted. This is the biggest mistake most people make do not get the 1% diluted biotin powder. Get the pure, powder, and I think you can get it on Amazon in the Pure Bulk brand or the bulk supplements brand. I don't know if Pure Bulk is on Amazon, but I know bulk supplements is. And if you're in the UK, I'm not sure. You probably have a better source than I would for the UK customers, but I think you can buy Pure Bulk
I
online in the
just normally
UK.
buy it from the US. Yeah, I think in Europe it's more of a problem. I think someone on your forum posted a Bucks Trade as a EU source.
So I use the bulk supplements brand from Amazon just because it's readily available and cheap. I haven't used any other brands in a while. So, and again, you have to get the pure powder, not the 1% diluted. Biotin is crucial in this process. I read so many people online saying, I've taken biotin before, I don't need that much. And in most cases, you don't. For HG7, if you are taking these nutrients for whatever reason, it uses a ungodly amount of biotin. You will go through, it eats biotin. You will notice when you put this stuff under your tongue, like I recommend, during the protocol, it starts to dissolve very quickly. And there will come up, and there comes a point where you cap out and it stops dissolving and it clumps up. That's when you know you've had enough. But taking EGCG and B6 together alone just spikes your biotin needs. And so you do need it, and you need a lot of it, 2.5 grams of it, 2,500 milligrams, not micrograms, milligrams. Um, and then vitamin C, or excuse me, 22 to 2,500. I actually recently dropped it down to 22. 25 might be a little overkill, but it's certainly over two. We've had too many people in this protocol show signs of low biotin from not taking at least 2 grams of it per dose. And then we get to vitamin C, and vitamin C is a tricky one. Vitamin C is one of the more variable ones for people. It entirely depends. Some people need a little bit more, some people need a little bit less, but I've also found that it heavily has to do with the form of vitamin C that you take. I've personally, and this is just, I could be totally, this could be in my head and it could be not real, but I believe that the more acidic, like the closer to ascorbic acid that this vitamin C is, the more effective it works for this protocol. The more buffered it is, the less effective it seems to be. That's just for me. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but because I'm only recommending what's standard to myself here, I would say that use ascorbic acid and only ascorbic acid. I would tell you do not use anything with added antioxidants in it. And we're talking 3.5 to 5 grams max. Some people might need a little more than 5 per standard dose, but very few people. And some people might need a little bit less than 3.5 per standard dose, but very few people. So it's usually in that range, 3.5 to 5 grams of vitamin C per dose. Then we get to zinc, which again, this one can vary entirely by individual, and we found that between men and women, it actually does probably vary a lot. But the minimum I recommend is around 50 milligrams. Sometimes you can get away with taking no zinc for a dose or two because you might be need to catch up on like an iron backlog. Um, when you uh, when you take more zinc, you essentially force more iron out because zinc and iron are what's competing for that receptor site. And so sometimes some people can take more zinc, force more iron out, causes more iron overload symptoms. So generally speaking, I recommend about 100 to start and work your way up to maybe 100 to 300, but don't exceed 300. We're finding most people do the best around 200 milligrams of zinc, especially men do the best around 200 to 250 milligrams per standard dose. It also depends on how much EGCG and B6 you take. So you kind of have to play with that a little bit, but it's in that range, anywhere from 100 to 300 is right around the safe zone. Yeah, sometimes if you're someone who has a history of taking lots of zinc, you might actually do very well taking no zinc for one or two doses. After that, your body's going to start craving zinc again because this eats every nutrient in this protocol is eaten very quickly. Um, then we have molybdenum, and that is another one people are scared of. And I don't blame people for being scared of that one because on its own, it will cause all sorts of problems if taken in high doses. But with this protocol, it is absolutely necessary. And this is one that took you a while to buy into too, because we had the ratios a little bit off. But you do need close to the upwards of 6 to 7 milligrams of this molybdenum amino acid chelate that we use.
If I could go back in time right now and hand the 30-year-old me one tool that would help save me 15 years of pain, fatigue, confusion, then this is what I'd do. I would give myself advanced health genetics all access reports. Now, unfortunately, it didn't exist back then, but if I could, or if I could go back in time and give myself the results that I've generated now, that's exactly what I would do. It would have told me instantly that I have multiple genetic SNPs, making me prone to choline, calcium, and tyrosine deficiency, among other things, lead and aldehyde toxicity, and bad histamine metabolism, which explain my brain fog, the IBS, the chronic sinus infections, the fatigue, everything. Instead of trying 400 random things, I could have laser focused on the top 5 things that actually mattered for my DNA. And that's exactly what this can do for you now. Over 500 reports, 200 million variants or SNPs analyzed with 99.7% accuracy, free lifetime updates, and the strongest privacy in the world. We're fully GDPR compliant. We anonymize your data. We store genetics and personal info separately, and you can delete everything with one click. We don't sell your data, ever. Try it now. Go to advancedhealthgenetics.com, and if you have an old DNA file, because maybe you've used an ancestry service like ancestry.com, 23andMe, anything like that, you can upload it and you have your first reports within hours. And if you don't, just select the DNA kit option. We'll send you a saliva test kit. It's really easy to do. Advanced Health Genetics is already by far the most affordable DNA reporting company of its kind. But if you use the code REJUVENATE at checkout, you get an additional 20% off your order. That's advancedhealthgenetics.com and use code REJUVENATE at checkout. Do it for the version of you that's tired of guessing. You deserve to know the truth about yourself. I don't think it's buy into. It's just I just felt better not using
Well,
it.
no,
You know,
no, I
it's
meant
an
your body
exception.
buying into it. Like your body wasn't like, I don't need that much yet. And then we have finally worked our way up to a point where your body's like, okay, I'm starting to need that much molybdenum, right? Or is that not
No,
true for you?
never. No, it just went from needing none to needing some, but it was never
Oh,
very much.
okay, okay, okay. So I misspoke on that, but there you do need um, a higher amount of molybdenum than what you're probably used to taking for most people in this protocol. We
Yeah, because
found
most people
some.
take 200 micrograms or something at the most, and yeah, I'm
You'll
still.
find tons of horror stories online of people taking even 500 micrograms of molybdenum and getting this electricy skin feely, for example, or just all sorts of other issues. And I would tell you that that's true. And do not take this level of molybdenum without this protocol. But with the protocol, you're going to need an upwards of, I mean, it could be anywhere upwards to 7 to 8 milligrams, depending on how much EGCG you take. Some people need less. Um, but it is not out of the ordinary for most people to have to take 7 to 8 milligrams per the standard that we're talking. And the reason why is that amount of EGCG, that 5 grams that we're about to get to, it is causing a massive flush of heavy metal dump into your kidneys. And with that metal dump, you're going to need a large surge of uric acid production, and that molybdenum is going to help with that. Um, so we've covered the molybdenum, covered the zinc, covered the vitamins.
Couple of questions about the EGCG. Number one, I saw someone saying that EGCG does also chelate and bind to zinc. What's your opinion on that?
It's possible, and it could be one of the reasons why zinc is needed so highly in this process. But um, there, if it were just chelating zinc,
No,
uh,
I don't think they were saying it just chelates zinc, but it's just one of the things it does also
oh,
chelate. So it's like,
no, no. So
yeah.
it is very possible that this does remove zinc. However, if if it did like remove a lot of zinc, like I've taken EGCG before where I was really overloaded on iron, and I took a bunch of EGCG, and it felt amazing. And then I took EGCG again when I wasn't overloaded on iron, and I felt very anemic. So it might chelate zinc, but I'm very convinced that iron is the biggest one that it goes after.
Okay. And then the other question is, did you ever try a more specific, I don't know if it's more specific, more powerful iron chelator, like for instance IP6?
I used to take IP6, and here's what I've noticed is throughout all these different iron chelators that I've tried many of them. Berberine, I think is what it's called. I can't remember if that's the right.
Quercetin is
Yeah,
potentially.
turmeric, I think, is one of them that they say chelates iron a little bit. For specifically the curcumin within turmeric. Um, I tried a lot of them, and IP6 was one of them as well. And I found that different they it's like they attack different sites in the body. Like IP6, I felt was much more of a blood cleanser versus a tissue chelator. Like it didn't feel like IP6 was going into my tissues. It felt like it was circulating through my blood and clearing gunk out of the blood. EGCG is unique in the way where it feels like it's going into my organs and getting rid of iron at that level. Because like I would feel a massive like whenever I was iron toxic during this process, I would get like a massive pressures in my liver, for example, in the liver area. I would feel extremely bloated. I would feel uh, dehydrated. Even my brain, my head would start to feel like really tight. I'd get those sinus headaches that you would talk about. I would get kidney pressures. EGCG would go in, and it felt like it was going into these areas and literally latching onto the metals and removing them. IP6 doesn't feel like that. IP6 feels like it's like a fishing net circulating through your blood and just latching on anything larger than life in there that it should be, and kind of like pulling that towards the liver. But it doesn't feel like it necessarily removed anything from the liver. It just removed it from the blood back to the liver. I don't know. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if that's. I can't speak in any confidence on that, but that's how it felt to me. So I've tried
Yeah, fair
different,
enough. Okay, so you
I've
tried it,
tried
yeah.
several different chelators. EGCG is the only one that I've ever tried that has successfully removed the metal, or at least I think it to be, um, from the actual like liver area or from the other organ area that relieved the pressures I was feeling in those areas. It's the only one.
Interesting. It would be really interesting to do that ferrous scan at some point and see if you have less iron in your liver than most people. Okay, sorry, and I interrupted. So, had you gone through all the nutrients? Was there one left?
Well, EGCG was the last one, which is
That's the last one, yeah. Okay.
uh, we've just found throughout this process, like when I started, I originally posted, I think, at like 2,000 milligrams for the standard, with everything else being roughly in a similar range except for biotin. But now it's at like 4,800 to 6,000, depending. It entirely depends on how much of everything else you take. If you take a higher amount of B6, like the 300, for example, you're going to need somewhere upwards of 5 to 6 grams of EGCG, and then a lot of everything else. Um, so yeah, it just entirely depends on how much of everything else you take. But yes, you can expect to take upwards of 5 to 6 grams of it. And another thing about EGCG that's important, brands matter here. They matter a lot. I don't know. I can't tell you all the good brands, and I don't want to list out bad brands on the protocol or on the podcast here. I don't want to call anybody out, but the brand that I use right now is the Horbach brand that you can find on Amazon. It's a triple strength green tea or something like that. I also recommend the Life Extension brand because I know that one to work. It's also a little more expensive. I buy the Horbach brand for price point, but it seems to work for me just fine. Um, some brands don't work, and if you get a brand that doesn't work, it'll really suck because you'll get all these high iron overload symptoms that you should have been able to clear out with the CGCG that isn't clearing out, and you're gonna think it's not working when it's really just the EGCG that's not working, not the protocol. My dad actually got had that issue. He got the brand I recommended not to get, and sure enough, he had headaches and all these other issues that were able to clear out when he got the Life Extension brand. So yeah,
All right. So it's important to get the right one. Yeah. I had one more question I'd be meaning to ask you. Diet. And I think up until now, you've generally kind of indicated that, or maybe you haven't, but I've got the impression that diet doesn't really matter. But I think I saw a forum post of someone asking you this, and you said like the one thing that gets in the way is dairy. And I thought that's interesting because I don't think I've ever had this protocol without dairy. So could you expand on that, or do you still feel that way? And is there anything else that you think is a bad idea?
When I said that, and when I say get in the way, I mean like we're talking if it does, it's mild. But I think maybe anything that contains higher amounts of calcium, just because calcium kind of tends to be an antagonist of zinc absorption, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, and iron absorption like significantly. So it would help in the process of if the liver was dumping iron into the intestines via the bile, it would actually help it stop it being reabsorbed.
I just know that if I drink milk with this protocol, I'm gonna get digestion issues. Um, I mean, it's not like I've had this protocol with dairy and just had like a wildly bad reaction. I mean, if there was a food group that I would think would have any sort of negative or even just counterproductive interaction with all those other metals in your stomach, the zinc and the molybdenum and the whatnot, I would say it's anything with high amounts of calcium
Because
because of the channel blocking avenue methods. I mean, I don't know. I read somewhere, and I could be totally wrong, that zinc and calcium kind of compete also in a way for absorption at
no,
the
they
same
do.
time.
No, you're right. Yeah,
So I just don't know if that excess calcium is just competing with HG7 in a way for, absorption. But if it is, it's very minor. Um, and obviously don't do this with alcohol. Like I wouldn't suggest taking this protocol while drinking because for some reason drinking affects your blood iron in a different way that might have, I don't know, just doesn't seem to work just right when you drink alcohol with this. So don't do that.
that definitely makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you don't really want to do it with anything that's stressing your liver. I imagine most people wouldn't though. um, Okay, well, that was great. So, how do you feel? Do you feel vindicated to some degree? Do you feel happy? Do you feel hopeful? Where are
I
you
will
at?
feel, I mean, I'm gonna taper my own expectations and say I'm gonna hold off on celebration until I see a comparison. So, a year from now, if I see as good or better metrics than what I've produced today, then I'll celebrate a little bit. But until then, I'm gonna keep optimistic but realistic and say that it still can be disputed, and we still have had failures on the forum, and I'm gonna be, total transparent. I'm not trying to hide anything. We've had, the very first person that took this protocol failed, and it was rather sad because
When you say failed,
failed as in, they couldn't find a calibration that worked for them, and they started getting more and more, stomach pains and all that. And to be fair, when I started this, I had the ratios wildly off, and it required a lot more self-experimentation than I thought it was going to take. You had to be very intuitive in the beginning of this process when I first posted this last year to figure it out. Um, Now we're at a point where it's far less intuitive than it was when it started. You still have to be a little bit on guard, read that first page like it's a Bible, and just read every symptom calibration checker to match what you're feeling. But it's not nearly as much of a guessing game as it was when it started. And so the first few people that started this had some pretty bad reactions long term because I had the zinc levels too high and the EGCG too low. Iron I theorized was surfacing too much in them, and they
I
started
remember
getting liver pains.
you were blaming vitamin C being too high for a while as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Initially.
C was too high, zinc was too low compared. Like all of these, this ratio was entirely off when I first posted this. However, it was still enough for enough people to say, okay, something's being done, something's working here. It's just I need to put in a little more work to get it to work than I want to right now. Um, and yeah, so we've had some failures, and most of the people who have failed is because they started off with those bad ratios. Now we've since updated those ratios and have been fine tuning for the last year, and we're now at a point where people are posting like, I don't have to calibrate that much anymore, and if I do, it's very mild. We're getting more and more successful. I'm watching people's reactions every day. If I have too many people saying they're getting low biotin symptoms, I start raising the biotin on the standard dosage, for example. If I have too many people claiming that they're having to calibrate with extra EGCG, I start raising that EGCG a little bit. And then vice versa. If people are saying, "Oh, I need, I'm getting too much or not enough zinc symptoms. Then I start lowering EGCG and raising zinc a little bit. So I've been doing these minor adjustments based on feedback of all these participants doing this protocol with me. And if I get enough feedback from the same people or from the people saying the same thing, that's my cue to say, okay, we need to make some adjustments here. And it's been getting more and more successful. We're very, very close. I mean, like I said, we're at a point where people aren't really calibrating that much. It's just that starting dose people are afraid to do. And again, when people start this, you really have to come into this protocol with an open mind, because if you come in here thinking you know everything, thinking that what you've read online is, solid fact science that never needs to be questioned again, it's probably not going to work for you, because a lot of what I'm doing is going counter to what a lot of the internet's going to tell you. A lot of the internet will tell you that it's ridiculous to take 5 grams of EGCG. It's going to tell you it's ridiculous to take 2 grams of biotin. And I'm going to tell you it's ridiculous not to, or you're going to hurt yourself really bad. So you're going to have to be, if you're going to try this, if you are, and it's up to you, I'm not going to take payments for anything. I'm not going to, as I've said many times, this is a experimental protocol. You have to come in with an experimental mindset. And that means you have to be okay with a few pains here and there, knowing that this is rather common with people. If you are going to continue, you have to be okay with that. Don't just immediately blame the protocol and leave. Otherwise, you're probably going to be very unhappy. Um, Give it a little bit, give it some calibration attempts. Don't immediately knock it off if you are going to try it. And you might find that it was worth the wait. I mean, most people do if they end up finding that right ratio, is that they end up saying that it is worth it. It's just finding that ratio can be a little harder than I would like, or anyone would like. And I don't blame people for giving up, especially when it's in there, everything online is telling you that it's probably bad for you. Now that's why I'm so glad I have this data, is now I can finally say, hey, I have evidence that I have been doing this extremely high dosages for 5 years, and apparently I'm mostly damage free. I mean, my lungs and my heart are a little bit more aged. That's
And I don't
pretty
think
much
they've been
it.
damaged by this protocol. I think they've been damaged by your lifestyle. So yeah, no, I think you should feel vindicated. Everyone is different, but you should at least feel vindicated in the sense that this protocol has not damaged you, even though everyone was telling you that it should have done. So that's significant. And as you said, to see how much it's benefiting you, I think you're probably wise to say you need to do another one in another, give it a while, 6 to 12 months or whatever, to really be sure. But you can at least be confident when people say to you, "Oh, you must have destroyed your liver with the amount of whatever you've done." You can say, "It doesn't look like it. Looks fine, actually." All right, awesome. Well, I know it's really late there because of my time zone shift. We started this after midnight, Jacob's time, so we'll let him go. We'll just do the if people want to find out more about this. I mean, I think this is the first time you've basically given them kind of the whole protocol in an episode, but still they need to check out all those calibration. How to adjust it correctly. So where should people go to find out everything else they need to know about this protocol?
Yep. Well, so I'm imagining you're going to post the link to the forum in the description below, right? So
I will, but I can tell you from experience, I don't know why. Like I can post things in the link in the description and even in the pin post sometimes, and I still get people emailing me, where is it? Where is it? So if you could also just read it out for them, that would be great.
yeah, so I will below.
Or, if they go to their social media and they can find it through there, whatever's
I,
easiest.
I mean, I don't recommend following me on social media, because my social media was never meant for my health stuff. And I tell this to people. I mean, like, you can, but don't be surprised to find some political stuff, because that is my um, avenue for venting about my dissatisfaction with the political climate of the world. So, I mean, that's I mean, like I said, if you're okay with, just the disclaimer that my ex is highly opinionated, and it's not health opinions, then fine, you can follow me on Twitter. But I would look for me on the low toxin forum. It's literally lowtoxinforum.com. It's actually now called the Bioenergetic. toxin-free living forum. Um, and there's a entire thread. It's actually one of the largest threads on this forum called the Theory Protocol Discussion of HG7. You can YouTube HG7. You'll find your videos. Just look in the link description below. You will find the link to the forum. Um, but if you Google low toxin forum HG7, you can find it, I'm sure, that way too. I'm not going to share my full name, not going to share where I work and all that, but you can Google enough about HG7 low toxin forum, you will find it. My screen name is TR Heisenberg. I like the name Heisenberg because of the show Breaking Bad, obviously, but he's a scientist, and he's kind of like a unconventional scientist who is in the show Breaking Bad. He's breaking some laws. I'm breaking natural physical laws by proving out, um, that, like I said, you can have your cake and eat it too. Anyway, so yeah, low toxin forum. Find the HG7 thread there. Log in, sign up. It's like $5 to $10 a month at best. I don't know the exact charge. I don't make any money off of it. It's not my forum. But if you get an account there and you ask and post on that forum, just kind of a brief description of who you are and the dosages that you're going to try. And if you have any questions, I will answer because I check that forum daily. And if you have any calibration help concerns, if you can't figure it out, again, just post what you're doing and I will see if I can provide some recommendations. But again, I'm not making money. I'm not a doctor. I am not accredited scientist. I am not, there is no one paying me to do this. So please take that in mind. And this is obviously not intended to cure any disease or whatever. It is a holistic health profile that I am theorizing to result in healing of all these things, but it is not a direct cause and effect cure for anything. And I don't want I don't want to confuse anybody as such. I don't want it to be sued for anything
except for
here.
perhaps, well, except for perhaps a deficiency of the nutrients that you're having them take.
Yeah, it is I
So,
mean, I would say this is a cure, I mean, a theoretical cure for zinc deficiency is theoretical. And what that fixes in the body, I theorize to be most things, but it's all theory. That's I want to be very clear. I am not accredited. I am not a doctor. Please do not take my advice as such. I am an engineer, nothing, if anything else, um, and a
great,
scientist and a
fair
very
enough.
curious person.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Jacob. Thank you for being willing to share your results. And we'll have you on again next time there's an update.
Awesome. No, thank you for having me. This has been absolutely great.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed that, I recommend watching our latest episode, which you can do by clicking above. And make sure to subscribe, like the video, comment, and share with anyone who you think might appreciate it. Thank you.